really super officially get started, maybe I'll just launch in with some introductions, especially about tech ladies, because I have a feeling most of you have been around. I recognize some names, but some look new. So I'll maybe steal a few minutes and buy some time while people are joining us to just give a little overview of who I am, what tech ladies is, and then I'm going to ask Rachel to do the same and then run through some webinar logistics about what's going on today, and then we'll launch into it. Okay, so tech ladies, quick overview. We've got over 140,000 members and we're still growing, and it's a really fun community to be a part of. And there's a lot of different ways you can get involved. And so as a free member, which I think most of you should be if you're able to register this event, but make sure that you're taking advantage of all of the things. So we have got a job board, like a talent network where you can post a profile so our employer partners can see who you are, reach out to you with opportunities. We have events like this about weekly, sometimes even more than that, but about weekly, that are going to be free and low cost, focused on the job search or professional development or hot issues in tech. So make sure you're coming back and looking at those. Beyond that, beyond supporting our members, we also partner with organizations that prioritize diversity and inclusion in the hiring process. And so that's a really important part of the work that we do. So I like to put it out there, even in these types of events, because perhaps your company is hoping to find more really talented women in tech. Reach out to us because we would love to figure out ways to partner and connect you to our community. So that's sort of my tech ladies spiel and my hope that you keep getting involved with us. I think the more involved you are, joining us in events like this, that are different virtual networking things, even in real life events are coming up, which I am so excited that we are relaunching those after kind of a break, when everything was shut down. So please get involved. The more involved you are, I think the more you get out of it. Okay. So now for my introduction. So I am Kelly Jamison. So I've been a career coach for over 15 years. I've been supporting the Tech Ladies community for a little over 2 years. Prior to working with Tech Ladies, I've worked at the engineering school at NYU, college internship program supporting individuals with learning disabilities in work. And then right prior to this, I worked at Hackbright Academy, which is a software engineering boot camp for women. So really focused on helping people pivot into tech, which has been really a lot of fun. So it's really kind of where I specialize now, is supporting women in tech. And just another little piece of me that I like to add is my background is in mental health. So I really try to take kind of a holistic approach to professional development. So in addition to providing all of the tangible aspects of a job search, I really like to consider how our jobs fit into our overall wellness and kind of the broader context of how our work fits into our lives, which I think is especially important in kind of today's job market and climate that I know Rachel and I are going to dig a little bit further into. Okay, so that's the end of my spiel. I think I bought us some time. We've got a good number of people in. Rachel, I want to hand it over to you. And then before we officially get started, I do want to go over just some logistics of like the webinar recording and all of that fun stuff.
Yes, wonderful. So thank you so much. I am Rachel Serwetz, and if we haven't met before, my background, I was in financial services at Goldman Sachs and then Bridgewater. I was informally coaching on the side and eventually dove deep and got my coaching training through NYU and certified through the ICF. And I've been running a company for career coaching now for 7 years. I also did a tech MBA at NYU Stern, and I've coached at a few other organizations. And yeah, Woken is my company. So we coach all different types of professionals in a variety of topics: clarifying your path, upskilling decisions, personal branding, job search, networking, interviewing, mindset, you name it, any career goal or challenge that you could think of. So it's such a wide array, which gives me a wide perspective. And so that's kind of why today is fun. We have so many different questions and different topics, but they're all interconnected. They all touch each other. So yeah, that's quickly the intro to me.
All right, so let's do it before we kind of launch in. So this webinar is being recorded, so you can always refer back to it, but that does also mean that things that you say in the chat are going to be visible in the recording. So the chat is on. Definitely encourage participation. You can ask questions in the chat, certainly, but if you want it to remain anonymous, use the Q&A feature. And to be honest, sometimes it's easier for me as a facilitator because sometimes like questions get sort of lost in the chat. So definitely be sure to use the Q&A feature. What else do I want to say? Oh, the closed captions have been enabled. So if that's something that's useful to you, please go into the bottom toolbar of your Zoom and enable those. And I think that's just about it. So I know Rachel and I wanted to talk a little bit together about the job market. And we also asked you to submit questions even upon registration. So we took a little bit of time yesterday and we kind of integrated some of them into kind of our launching discussion. But we're really hoping to customize this to what you guys need. So especially the people who are able to attend live. So we're hoping to launch pretty quickly into questions, or if what we're talking about in the moment is sparking a question for you, ask it. This is kind of our time to collaborate together and customize your needs.
Perfect. Yeah. And I just put a quick poll there. If you want to respond in the chat, please feel free. It's always helpful for us to get a sense of just what people are focusing on. And yeah, I could have guessed a large focus on job seeking. So that's cool because we can absolutely focus on that. And I see some other stuff too, exploring pivots and entrepreneurship. Cool. Wonderful. Love that. Okay. Beautiful. All right. Yeah, Kelly, are we feeling good to dive in?
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's dive in. I don't know. No, my little like document sheet pad of an outline just went away. So I have to pull it back.
Oh, okay. I have it. So I'll prompt
technology
you.
is like beating me today for some
Oh,
reason.
all good. I'll give you our prompts. And I know we'll both touch on it, but let's just start with, this is a very broad question, but just the top trends you're seeing in the job market today. I know this event was all about trends, and of course, we've got more specific elements of what that could mean. But I'm curious to ask you, Kelly, in such an open-ended way, because like, what stands out to you? Like, what feels blaring when you think about the job market and the trends that really, yeah, come top of mind?
Yeah. So, okay. I feel like this is hard because when I was reflecting on this question, I was thinking about the tone that I wanted to set for today. Because I think, unfortunately, some of the trends and the general attitude we're seeing are hard and can lead pretty easily into pessimism and kind of feeling a little bit defeated. So in talking about some of kind of the more difficult trends that we're seeing today, I'm going to try really hard to just acknowledge the reality of it, because I think, especially if we have a lot of job seekers here, you're experiencing it and it's hard. So I don't want to diminish this. And at the same time, I don't want to turn this into like a cheerleading, rah, like super flowery, inflated optimism, right? But really trying to pivot to control what we can. So having said that, I do think trends wise in hiring, it's tricky. Like it's hard. I'm seeing people with a longer extended job search. Hearing a lot of stories about people who are experiencing job loss for various reasons. And I think that again can lead to pessimism. I think if I can twist those into actionable items, I think that because it is more common, it's more a part of the dialogue, right? So people, because it's a more common experience, I think feel more free to talk about their experience. And I think it can lessen sort of like the stigma and the shame around it. And I think that hiring managers are recognizing that it's challenging out there. So therefore, gaps that might have been concerning, 2 years ago are a little less concerning. And even with having said all that, people really are still finding jobs. So there is still a market out there. People are still hiring, but it is putting a little more of an onus on the job seeker to really like grind and hustle and get creative and dig into that grit. So I feel like that's a lot of what I kind of want to focus on today and like hear from you all where your sticking points are. So we can talk a little bit more of those actionable and creative pieces.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you,
I mean,
Rachel?
I
What do you think?
second everything you just said. Very well put. Um, I would say the quick things that come to my mind, like totally agree. Yes, it's hard, but people still are interviewing and landing. So learning from other job seekers. How did you land? What worked, right? Like build your job seeker community to share tips and email templates or what language is resonating and, getting creative. Like sometimes the networking outreach that I recommend has nothing to do with job search. It's more organic networking and see where that leads. Or it's more, networking that might feel not obvious of how this person can help and then see where that leads to. So when you say creativity, just like shaking up your methods, I had a call with somebody yesterday and they were like, I've just only been applying online and that's my whole week. And I'm like, let's not do that. So, just switching up your methods too. And I think informing yourself about different methods and different tactics and how to spend time wisely. To me, whenever something's like not working, and I find job search very similar to entrepreneurship, it's like you measure, you learn from others, you see what's working, you see what's not, and you switch it up. And so if on a daily, weekly basis, you are measuring and pivoting, to me that's the most comforting because you're like, I'm trying something new. I joined a different group, or I have a different mentor, or I tried this other job board, or whatever it may be, or I switched up my resume format. And I mean, any experiments, I mean, you don't want to be, getting yourself into a tailspin. Of course you could get overly creative. You don't need a new resume every day. But the switch up, the learning new tactics, the learning from other job seekers, and most importantly, just not being on the job boards all day every day, and just making sure that networking is at the forefront. But there's so many other activities to be doing. And so to me, like the answer of what am I seeing in the job market, I would say is that the online job applications are just less and less effective is what I'm seeing. And so to me, that just means other activities, right? Do I join events? Do I start doing some pro bono volunteering and I meet people that way? Or I start doing hourly freelancing and I, get a gig that way. And so just shaking up all the different productive things to do to get yourself out there. And just being very wary of the balance of your time. So that's the trend. And I mean, some quick ideas around it. Of course, there's so much more. I'm sort of touching a lot of random ideas at this moment just to get the wheels turning. But I think that's the biggest overall theme is just don't sit there all day applying online and get really creative. And these are just a few of the many things you could do, but it's more of the overall mindset of like, say I'm giving you 3 ideas here, fine. But I think it's the mindset of I'm going to go into my day and my week and own it and actually ask myself what else could be new and different, and find a new and different resource or a new and different person. So that newness, that variety, that creativity needs to be built in versus like the monotony around it and the everyday, all day online apps. I mean, that's where it gets boring too. Like, how can it, I mean, fun is a strong word, but how can you find energy in, I'm actually interested in what I'm even looking into? So a lot of this comes back to the tactical things, but they're inherently tied to the energy and the resilience, right? So the mindset will infuse the different actions that you take, but and all of this is grounded in the fact that unfortunately the system that we want to work, those online apps, we hope they work and they just don't always. So how do we get around that? And that's the mindset, which will create new tactics, right? It's a very long-winded, overarching theme, but that's how I'm feeling right now, pretty much when I'm talking to job seekers.
Yeah, I think you're so right. Cause I mean, another sort of trend that I'm seeing, even of people who are employed, is a lot of burnout, right? A lot of people where it's, whether it's like the job search that is a grind or burnout in their current role. So I think hitting on that energy piece is super important. I think something we can kind of dig into when we get into like kind of the nitty gritty of what a good job search looks like is how to balance their time and what activities. But before we get into that, I wanted to hit on something that you had mentioned as like a little bit of flexibility. So I'm seeing that as a trend too, is a lot of people that I am working with are finding that they have to be a little bit more flexible in the types of roles that they're looking at. If it's like a fractional role, if it is a contract role, If it is a little bit more of a stepping stone role,
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit of a different trend, especially the fractional roles. I feel like have you been seeing that? I feel like within the past, like,
Well, it depends. I mean, if you're going for startups, the fractional is great, but even bigger companies could have part-time contract work. But I guess I want to also differentiate. There's flexibility, but there's also focus. So focus your brand of like what your strengths are, what your skills are, and what function you play, but the flexibility in how you deliver skills and value in turn for money. I mean, that's what it is, right? But to your point, yes, could that be hourly? Could it be project based? Could it be contract based? Could you even find like agencies, right? I had a client who's in sales and she found this agency where they found the clients. They had a different salespeople, but they would farm out like the one salesperson to that client. So you're not really in-house. You're almost like consulting to some extent. You like really became in-house. They sort of paired you with the client, but like that was just a different model, right? Like that's a company that literally just is that marketplace to match. And the only way to uncover those is researching and networking with other people in your field who have done part-time work or more entrepreneurial or freelancing. But yeah, I do think that's a big trend, is to be open to that. And a lot of people are like, how do I find that? But I think it's a lot of the same, which is you're going to network anyway. It's just when you make your ask at the end of that call, it's not just, oh, do you have any full-time roles, but listen to everything they say they need. And if they have any budget, you could send a proposal and all of a sudden, maybe they just need you for a few hours a week. And hey, it's a gig and it's something, right? And so, yeah, tapping into the different, and so there's formal online postings that are part-time, but there's also just, how do I make this, you still have your same brand skills and value. It's just what format could, what could that look like, right? In how you deliver it. Yeah.
yeah, totally. Yeah, there's a lot more ability to pivot into more kind of the opportunistic hires if you're making the connections with people, right? Because I have also seen like it's not even a job that is officially posted, but you're working with someone and able to kind of carve out a few hours or a little bit of a contract, which can be super helpful in helping people just financially have a little bit more runway for their search. But I think you're right. I feel like the key is always that creativity, that understanding of your brand, how to articulate it and how to get it in front of people through
Yes.
networking.
Yes. I always say like job search is a funnel. So if you're not landing those first round interviews, you want to think about the top of the funnel of more networking and, like you said, getting yourself out there into more channels and just more spaces and places and people and groups and events. If you're landing interviews but no offers, and that's the pattern you're seeing, then we need mock interviews and we need to figure out, are you articulating your fit? So look for patterns and see what that tells you about where you need to spend more energy. And as soon as you move through the funnel and you get to those interview stages, great. Then you're going to really stare at that and be the best candidate and follow up really well and do all these creative things to stand out. But yeah, figuring out where you are, what those patterns are, will tell you like where you need to focus.
Yeah, totally. And then I was just looking at our notes or some of the trends we wanted to hit before popping into the questions. And something I hear a lot about from people that I'm working with is like the seasonality of hiring, especially this time of year going into the holidays. Rachel, what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
seasonality?
We're inching closer to Thanksgiving, but I feel like from right now, I'm looking at the calendar, we're October 23rd. We've got until, I don't know, November. Thanksgiving is late this year. I'm like, what's going on with my calendar? We've got till the 28th. Like, okay, maybe people start traveling that week of the 25th, 27th, whatever it is. But let's call it through at least November 22nd. You've got a solid 30 days to be productive. I think the workforce is focused right now. I think we will all take a breather around Thanksgiving. It's that weird stretch of like, we had sort of Labor Day and other holidays, and then you kind of have this weird stretch of time until Thanksgiving. But I think people are focused right now. And guess what? When people take a break, you take a break. If you're a job seeker, like take that breather. That's your moment. Enjoy Thanksgiving, enjoy whatever it is you're doing with your family, and take it because you need to rejuvenate. And then after that, I would say December, like I'm looking at the calendar. I'm like, you got a solid at least 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, could be 3 weeks. Everybody's different. Some people are going to be like the second half of December, they're off, or some are just the last week. So it totally depends. But at least those 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks in December, like still is fair game. And then, as we all know, January, I mean, we just hit the ground running. I mean, it's going to be hot and fiery. And but again, I wouldn't slow down right now. I would say you can be super strategic. And even if you wanted to be productive during the holidays, you could make a strategic list of connections, research the right people, draft your email. You don't have to send it, right? Things like that. So there's always ways to be proactive, even during those moments. But again, take breaks too, but just find those pockets. When everyone else is off, you're off. And, and in between, we've got good focus time from now until Thanksgiving, I would say.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I agree with you. Sometimes I think a lot of people like to get the dialogue that it totally shuts down, and I don't think it does. I think you might have some slower responses around those kind of key holiday times, but I think you still owe it to yourself to keep up a little bit of the grind.
Yeah.
But I love the idea, and I feel like it's going to be a recurring theme for today of keeping your energy. And part
Yeah.
of that is allowing yourself those breaks, right? Like, I know it's cliche, but people will say finding a job can feel like a full-time job within
It
itself.
is. It
The
is.
amount of time and
And
effort.
worse.
Yeah, but also with that, people who are working full-time jobs should still have boundaries and should still take breaks, because you're not going to be the most effective if you are completely depleted.
Right.
Uh, so let
Right.
I want you all to keep that.
And the other thing around the holidays is like, be strategic. Like, you're not going to send an email the day before Thanksgiving or whatever it is, right? So like, just be creative about it, but still there's those good pockets of time that you still have, a lot of value. Um, this other question, Kelly, that came in, are there any industries that seem to be hiring more often or more quickly? Why do you think that is? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I saw that and I feel like that is a hard one. I think Rachel, you and I even were kind of trying to figure it out together. If I were working with whoever submitted this question one-on-one, I think I would want to dig into the motivations there of why you're asking that question, right? If you're sort of like young in your career or looking to make a pivot and you're trying to explore different industries, I think that's one thing. You can kind of look for things that are hot, but I would caution people against chasing trends because trends come and go. I'm not necessarily seeing like one vertical or one thing grow. I think certainly AI, and I think it would be fun to hit on both how that's being used, what the industry is, how we can use it to our advantage as job seekers. But I think we are seeing that as clearly a trend here. But more importantly than sort of chasing trends or going where people might be hiring the most, I think it's important to really understand your goals and your skills and figure out how those things can combine to identify the right opportunities for you, right? So if you're noticing a gap between your goals and your skills, might need to think about sort of like upskilling and figuring out how to close that gap. But I find myself almost wanting to go on another tangent now, like job search related, but that is something that I also see a lot of people wondering why they're not getting any hits on applications. And it might be just that you're not applying to the right jobs, or, even if they are the right jobs, you're maybe not doing the most effective job of tailoring your application materials to that or utilizing your network to get connected.
Right.
But that's kind of another tangent we can go on, but like,
Well, I think you make a good point that sometimes people conflate my lack of job search results with like, is this the right role or is this the right industry? And I think they're two totally different pieces, which is, what's the right path for me? I definitely need to understand these job applications well. And am I reading the right thing? Am I applying to the right things? But even if you're not seeing results, you might need to just change methods of, let me just lead with networking versus spending all day editing my resume, right? Let me switch up how I get myself out there and get my foot in the door. And so separate like, all these pieces. And again, I agree with you. Like, don't just chase what you think makes sense on paper, or what, these industries that are hot and trending. It's like, whatever your expertise is, that's what's trending. And in rare cases, okay, like I was saying this to you, like during COVID, okay, hospitality, you're not going to go work at a hotel. Like that was a very rare period of time. And so you can research what is trending or not, but in today's job market, zooming in on the roles and industries that you have expertise in, that's where you want to be. Right. So just be very wary of macro trends and even just macro news about layoffs and all that. Just turn the news off and, research what you need to research. That relates to you, and go deep, right? What are those innovative companies? What are the competitors? Like, what size organization do I want to be at? Am I networking? What role am I a best fit for? Go deep to find more of the right thing, versus just like, oh, where do I think the opportunities are, right? I think people assume sometimes, oh, there's nothing out there, but it's like, if I know my path, I can find as many companies as I want. I just have to do more research. Most fields are, I would say, like pervasive and wider than you think. Now, sometimes your role might be super niche. And if you're like, this role barely exists, okay, that could be a moment to strategize of like, what are some adjacencies that make more sense? But more often than not, there's more opportunities than you think in your field. You just have to push yourself to find them.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally right. And before we transition again, I'm curious to those of you who are in attendance right now, if you have what your thoughts are in AI in the job search, either how recruiters might be using it or if you yourselves are using it. Because I know it's really a hot topic that I think would be fun for us to talk about, but I want to open it up to anyone who's here also to see if there's specific questions.
Yeah, questions, or feel free in the chat too. Like, I'm almost curious, like your gut, like if there was a few words that came to your mind when you think about AI, are you like, I'm an expert, I'm using it every day, or are you like, I'm scared of it, or are you like, I don't know anything about it? Like even that's helpful to recognize where you stand in relation to it. And okay, great. I see a comment here that it can be really helpful for writing and research. Yeah, I agree. Research is probably the top thing. Interview prep, absolutely. With cover letters, I would just be a little wary with like a resume or thing. Like I wouldn't necessarily copy paste, but I think it's great to brainstorm phrasing or how do I articulate, but still make sure your materials feel like your own. Because otherwise I have heard people say, can recruiters tell whether it's written by AI, right? So I would just use it as food for thought and still be the owner of everything you put out there, right?
I think that's such a valid point. And, speaking to someone else that was hiring, and she said she had two cover letters that were exactly the same. So we can maybe make some inferences of how those were created. So I think it is such a powerful tool, but certainly it should not be used in sort of an input job description and copy paste whatever cover letter is created. But yeah, definitely personalize it. I see Samantha said that in the chat. What I find to be helpful is sometimes it helps me get over a writing block. So I might want a little bit of a prompt, right? But I think even just trying to create something myself so that I know it is in my brain, in my voice, and then I might get a little extra support. I might say, hey, I'm trying to hit this tone. Can you help me rephrase this with as few edits as possible? And then I get it back, and like, I might even need to tweak it from there. But I think that especially when recruiters are getting applications in mass, you don't want to rely too much on
Yeah.
first response from your.
Right. But I love what you just said, like, tell it your tone, or like write it and then you could put it in and say, can you help make this a little better, or check for grammar, or do you notice, you could even get more creative. You could say, do you notice opportunities of how to strengthen this, and then you strengthen it. Like, use it as a tool to learn versus just giving you the cookie cutter generic. Like what you just said about how there was two cover letters exactly the same. I mean, somebody probably just said, "Can you write me a cover letter for this job?" Like that is something to be wary of. So like, how do you still make it your own? But say either use this tone or tell me what could be stronger about this. Like, am I using enough metrics, right? Or whatever, right? Like, you can ask it any hard question. Um, Samantha mentioned how we're hiring folks using AI. And at least in my experience, I would say AI is just in those ATS systems. And even like in LinkedIn to some extent. I mean, LinkedIn recruiter can be, yeah, right. Job scan is great to compare your resume, but I would say on their side, they're looking at keywords in your applications. And again, the same happens on a LinkedIn profile. But again, this is sort of the issue where like right now, because AI is very powerful, anyone can use it and anyone can have the right keywords. And so to me, when people say, how do I stand out? They often say that because we're not breaking through past those applications. And that's because it's become quite noisy and hard to differentiate between two of the same cover letters. And so that's where networking is just so important. If you're meeting with a human on a 20-minute informational chat or 30 minutes and they're getting to know you, how much better is that going to be when they put in a good word about you and they say, all these wonderful things and they tell their recruiter they should meet you and all this great stuff. So just weaseling your way in. I mean, it might seem, I think some people hesitate with networking, but it's just so critical to get comfortable with how to do it authentically and effectively. And that's kind of how we get around. So AI can be helpful. Absolutely tailor your materials, but just don't rely on that is all I do all week. And I've never talked to a human during my job search.
Yes, and I do think you can also use AI for those networking outreach pieces because I feel like a lot of people that I've worked with who are going through a really extensive job search, people like Rachel and I will always be like, network, 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 reach out, reach out. And in doing so, the most effective outreach is going to be personalized. Uh, and that can get like tedious, exhausting, time consuming. So I found AI to be also really helpful there. Like someone that I'm working with has sort of like a base introduction as far as like who she is, sort of why she's reaching out. And then she'll like take some information from the person's like LinkedIn profile that is somewhat relevant to her own experience. If it's sort of like alumni, common interests, career path, put that into, I think, I don't know which one she uses, but her like little AI buddy, and to help create a more customized outreach. And she still puts it in her voice. And I just thought that was a really good use of it, right? Because if
Yeah,
you're
people
talking,
struggle with email. I mean, it
yeah,
absolutely is. How do I make my ask? How do I make it clear? How do I make it thoughtful? How do I make it customized? How do I make it that, it shows that I'm prepared to use their time wisely? It's robust enough where they're going to resonate and they're going to say, yes, absolutely, let's chat. So taking 20 minutes to write like an amazing email, 100%. I think people sleep on the power of email. Find their email address if you don't already have it. And I like email over LinkedIn DM. And then yeah, write an awesome email. And I think there's a big difference between emailing somebody for like, I want to chat with you and I want an informational chat versus there are times where it's a recruiter or a hiring manager. You're going to be direct about the fact that you really align with this role. We actually have a free downloadable template on how you would do that. Cause that's almost like a cover letter, but I kind of get more creative with like, you're looking for this. Here's exactly when I've done that before. And like you can format your email. Like I love to play around with the visual format of how to make it a no-brainer. Like you need these three things. I've done these three things. Great. And a recruiter reads that and it's like, we should definitely get on the phone. So there are those types of emails and there's other types of emails, right, with networking. But I agree with you. Those tools can really help you and just wrestle with it. You can go back and forth and you could say, I'm not feeling sure about that, right? Like, so, ChatGPT, AI, it's such a great way to get comfortable. Like if you have a concern in job search or something's a hesitation, like actually just use it as a way to work through that, right? I also see some Q&A in the chat here. So Kelly, I don't know if you want to migrate to that. I'm happy to
yeah,
hit some of those too.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it. Let's launch into because we definitely have some pre-submitted questions that we'll get to as well, but also I want to make sure we're getting to the people who are here live so we can build off of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one says, as a mid-level front-end developer, does it still make sense to create a portfolio of personal projects? Would it improve my chances of applying? Uh, I mean, I say yes. And I think it like Rachel said, and I want to keep coming back to, we have to figure out how to manage your time, because I know that creating a portfolio is time consuming. But I think in order to stand out, it's even more important to prove what you can do versus just say that you can do it. So versus just saying that you have done something or putting a line on your resume, but especially for something that is so visual, like front end development, to be able to actually prove and showcase your work is pretty important.
Yeah. Well, so, but it's interesting because you mentioned personal projects. So like with portfolios, you know, if you can showcase obviously the professional stuff that you've done in previous jobs, that's great. Sometimes it was confidential, sometimes you just don't have the access to doing that. But as much as humanly possible, even if you don't have the access to the raw code, you can put slides together to say, I coded this and I wrote 90,000 lines of code, or I did whatever. And it's like, here's the product I built and screenshots. I mean, there's things that are not as confidential that you can show in that kind of a portfolio. And so start with like the core, like what are the most relevant things that I've done? And then in addition, the personal stuff, absolutely. I mean, this goes for any job seeker, not just developers. Like I've heard a lot from hiring managers and recruiters that having a personal website, and it can be simple. Like I've seen an amazing Notion page, things like that, where it can be simple, but it's a creative way to show your brand, show that you're somebody that takes initiative, and you visually get to represent who you are more holistically than a resume. And it just shows that you are a person that goes above and beyond, that you are creative, that you have personal projects, and it's more interesting. And it just, I think it's like a subconscious moment where that hiring person is like, oh, I want to learn more about this, you know? So, um, I think that portfolio slash website slash whatever you want to do has become more not like important, because again, I don't want you to spend all week on it, but I would say periodically, like work on that a little bit every week. And before you know it, you'll have it a great draft, and you can always make it better over the course of your life. But the personal branding of
Mhm.
everything you've kind of done, and just visual ways to represent your work that isn't just a resume, like slides or Canva or just the website. I mean, there's just different ways to represent it. And I love a good like slides, because you just show essentially the star method. Like, here's what I did, here's how I did it, here's the outcome. You've got a few key stories. That looks nicer. It's easier to digest than a resume. So get creative with how you represent everything.
Totally. And I often recommend people too, if you're not ready to totally launch like a whole portfolio site, to start small and start adding visuals to your LinkedIn profile, right? You can start to put together whether it is that slide deck or it is that quick video, like screen grab of something that you have done. Throw it under the relevant experience under LinkedIn so that when like a recruiter, hiring manager connection is looking there, they can see it. And then you can kind of slowly in the background filter it into your own kind of more elaborate page. Um, but I think action is more important than inaction, right? So you don't want to get stopped by the overwhelming task of creating like this amazing portfolio page. Chunk it out. And if you have a little chunk that's ready to be seen, make it seen.
Right. The first chunk could just be, I like how you said the videos and screen grabs, but sometimes even on a Notion page or a website, like it could just be your bio. And then eventually you add page two. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Keep it small. And again, Notion page, like that's not you needing to know how to build a website. Notion is pretty intuitive, things like that. So it doesn't even have to be so like, oh, I'm doing branding on my logo. It doesn't have to be like fancy colors, but you know, there's visual sites that feel more nice and interactive for somebody to read through. But yeah, start really small. Just launch the tiniest little piece and then you add page two later. Um, I see another question. Can you list your top 3 interview strategies? What are your most important principles when being interviewed? Yeah, Kelly, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think first is the research, is going into the job and knowing not only the job description, but also the company, and even broader than that, like the industry. What are the industry trends, any competitors that are there? So I think the more informed you can go in, the more that then you can customize your stories, the things that you want to share about yourself. Sorry if you can hear that. I thought I silenced my stuff. The more you understand, right, the better you can customize your answers, your stories, the things that you want to share about yourself to make sure that you're really highlighting the things that they want to see. So I know, Rachel, you mentioned the STAR method in your last thing, and that is like, so my first like career coaching gig, that was like the presentation that I would give was the STAR method. And it is just tried and true. I feel like a lot of things in the job search as far as technology have changed. There are new approaches, but I feel like that STAR method,
Yeah, it doesn't change. But
it's
actually,
so
I can add to the STAR method. There's a few key pieces that I've added to it, I
I
would
want
say.
to hear it.
But
Yes.
I agree with you. It is tried and true because what it is how do I find a logical way to be concise and comprehensive and just have somebody follow my story? And being concise and comprehensive during an interview is the challenge. That is why it's difficult. That's why we do mock interviews. That's why you have to practice. And I would say to answer this question, A, just like practice out loud. If I were to say nothing else, just like please practice out loud, it will help so, so, so much. And even the subconscious, like so that your body doesn't go into like fight or flight. If you practice out loud, you'll feel better with the rhythm of like my tone, even my posture, and just how do I talk? I mean, what does it feel like to give an answer for 90 seconds and not talk for 4 minutes or whatever? Like you're going to start to feel the rhythm of it and your pace, your breathing, your tone, your demeanor, all these types of things. So practice out loud. But with the STAR, so if you don't already know STAR, it's situation, task, action, result. And we could put that in the chat. But the ways I enhance that is even before you launch into a story, you can give a little context because if this is a task you've done millions of times, you could be like, yes, for the past several years, that's something that was a part of my core responsibilities. Happy to give you an example. Something like that is like, oh, wow, like this person does this all the time, but they're just going to tell me that one story. Because otherwise you're like, is this the only time they ever did this? Right. So the depth of it. And then at the end, sometimes I like to see STAR and then L, which is learning. What'd you take away from that experience? Did it change you for the next time? Did it influence how you would approach this in the future? Or yeah, what were the insights? I mean, sometimes that's part of the results, but sometimes it's your own personal take, your own personal insights, growth that happened. Did it change the company strategy? I mean, just the broader impacts, perhaps, if there's anything. And yes, quantify too. And so especially with results, I mean, that's really where, how do we literally know that the actions you took had an impact? So numbers are great. Sometimes it's like the client was satisfied, or we met the goal date on time, or things like that. I mean, even that is specific, but as specific as you can be with like, how do we know it literally went well? And just, you have to practice this out loud with someone else, another pair of eyes and ears, and they're going to say, you're talking too fast, or I didn't understand anything you're saying, or, how do you make a story clear to somebody that wasn't there? So there's a lot about interview stuff that requires practice, but you get better at it over time, but have another pair of eyes and ears, and that will just sort of save you, and it will help you feel better. Like I'm doing the prep that is going to make me feel confident walking in. And there's always some level of nerves, but the more practice you do out loud, you're going to walk in just feeling genuinely more comfortable.
Yeah. And I think even the more that you write it or think about it, but something about that transition to actually getting the words out of your mouth, the
Yes.
more you say it, the easier it becomes. No, I love the STAR method, and a couple of comments. I think someone also in the chat mentioned that AI is helpful for interview prep too. So even as simple as inputting the job description and asking them to think of questions that might be asked of you, or what are some of the key skills and qualities that this role is looking for, and then making sure that you have one of your stories that is going to land on that. Another quick thing that I find super helpful that for people who are going on a lot of interviews, just create almost like a book of stories. Get a collection of stories that really like you're super proud of, that highlight something that you have done, and then write them out and then start to parse out whatever skills or qualities that they're highlighting. And you'll find it's like almost I always think of it as like a politician debate approach. Like you'll find that those stories can be used to answer multiple questions. Obviously, not within the same interview, but you kind of understand that, oh, this story highlights like X, Y, and Z skills. So if they ask about X, Y, and Z, I can share this story that I'm really proud of, right? And you kind of have this collection that you can sort through. Um, and
Yeah,
another
I
quick
love that.
tip on interviewing, Rachel, follow up, right? Okay, so I don't want people to miss that. So what are your thoughts on the time frame for follow-ups and like what a good follow-up note would look like?
Yes, and honestly, I'm getting more talk about trends. I would say I'm getting more bullish on the follow-up because it's not just the thank you note. It's once a week, essentially. You're sending like this warm note. It used to be like you could do kind of a nice two-sentencer and just remind them of your chat. And now I'm like, look, you don't need to write an essay, but get creative. Like, had you written a blog that you can send, or you find some other article that feels relevant to your conversation, or start asking questions and sharing ideas about the work. I mean, they most likely shared with you about their projects and their challenges. So start conversing or things like that. Or, again, a Notion page, a 30, 60, 90 plan. You're sharing your portfolio, sharing even a video, like take a video of yourself and just talk about your fit, your interest. I mean, anything relevant to the conversation. There's different formats and there's different content of what you can do, but going out of your way. Like we used to just be able to interview and land a job. And now it's like the person who bends over backwards. And it's like, you have to cherry pick like which interviews are worth my time to go all the way out of the way and do these things. But if you really are gung-ho about it, don't just like sit there and wait. Do something creative. Right now, balance your expectations. Don't feel like you're putting all your eggs in one basket and spending all week doing this, but a balance of time. Put something nice together, put something good together, and make it meaningful. To it's not just a reminder of your fit, but it's like the person who cares the most, and the energy and the thoughtfulness and the initiative and all this good stuff. If you're already thinking about their challenges and their projects, like, wow, they're just going to be like, this person wants to be here. Right. And so it's all a bit subconscious. Sometimes I would say hiring should be more objective and measurable and fair, but like go out of your way to be the no-brainer candidate.
Yeah, I do think that effort and thought goes a long way. I think especially like I feel like I keep circling back to the AI because it is so easy to just input things and not put a ton of thought, right? But if you can prove that you are thinking about those challenges, I think that's lovely. And I think it's fair too. I've had people who maybe they thought something in the interview didn't go great. They kind of flubbed a
Right.
question,
Clarify. Right.
or they afterwards were like, oh, I should have shared this. Like, do it.
Do
It's
it.
it's not going to hurt anything, right? You have to
If
be
anything, I think it shows something positive. It shows that you're willing to reflect deeper. You're willing to clarify your own thoughts. You're willing to correct yourself or add more details. I mean, that's just good communication skills. I think it shows more positive than anything else. And it's all about how you frame it. Like you don't have to say, "Oh, I messed up this answer." You could say, I wanted to add more context. When you asked me X, Y, and Z, I've thought about it a lot, and there was a few extra points that I think would help provide my answer. Boom, boom. And guess what? You can use bullets. And sometimes people are better communicators in writing.
yes.
So use your strength. If you can articulate, concretely your thoughts instead of verbally, use that to your advantage.
Yes. Okay, great. Okay, I can't believe this is going fairly fast. So we've got like 10 minutes left in the hour, and I want to get to a question. So it says, as a job seeker on maternity leave, do you have any recommendations? So I find it hard to find a part-time or shared job. What does it say? If I apply to roles that should be full-time roles, would an employer be open to it becoming a part-time job?
Mm. My gut, if you want part-time, would probably be to not apply to things that deliberately say full-time. But that's just my gut. I'm curious, Kelly, if you agree, but like I would get more creative. I do think job boards, including LinkedIn, have the part-time filter. Although I don't know if that filter always, and not that it doesn't work, but like for example, I just typed in something earlier today and some things came up, and then you read the job description and it talks about part-time, right? So I would look for the opportunities that genuinely feel aligned with what you want. They are posted often, those part-time roles. Um, and if not, honestly, I think networking can also be creative. Like I'm weirdly probably still part of some email blast, and I can't remember if it's like Accenture or EY, and they just send you jobs, and I don't know why I'm on it. But the point is like there are certain bigger companies that do just literally hire part-time, and you may want bigger company or medium or smaller, but really getting to know what companies do that for your field, for your function. So doing the research, doing the networking, knowing what you want to target, and using the online job boards to actually filter for part-time would be my quick answer. I don't want you to waste your time going for full-time if you're like, I don't want that.
Yeah, I'm with you, Rachel. I think often if people are posting full time, they probably scoped out a full time role. Granted, there might be exceptions. So if it's something that you see that you are so excited about, it might be worth. I wouldn't say just directly applying though. I think in this case, if it's special, you got to kind of work your networks to figure out somebody who works there, to kind of like maneuver your way in, to prove your worth, and maybe see how you can contribute in some way, even if you're not able to contribute full time. But I think
Yeah, that's a great point. You never know. I
you
mean, they may
never,
love you, and then you're like, here's the project based, and kind of how we said earlier with the, oh, you sent a proposal, and so it's possible, but again, I don't know if I would like spend 100% of my time only looking for full time.
exactly. Yeah, I think I would target your efforts more on the listed part time, or again, like really working the networking contacts. I know we keep coming back to that, but that really is the people who can say, we don't have anything full time right now, but we're excited about what you have to offer. Sometimes I've had people find success even almost doing a little bit of a proposal, right? Talking to someone in a more casual information sessions, almost doing a needs analysis of the problems that
Right.
they're
It's
facing.
like an entrepreneur, like it's a sales call, basically. Imagine you're assessing their needs and then you synthesize and you say, right, you have to think of yourself like an entrepreneur yeah.
I, I love that, a sales call. Yeah, exactly.
It is. You don't want it to feel salesy per se, but imagine if you were an entrepreneur selling your services, what would you do on the first call to diagnose their needs? So if you're a marketing professional, you'd have to get to know their current efforts, what's working, what's not, this, that, and the other thing, their challenges. And then all of a sudden your proposal is like, here are the next steps of how I would help you. And all of a sudden, if you outline that in a really robust way, and they're like, oh, wait, you can get us to that finish line in this many months. And here's the price, and we don't have to pay full time. And, so you get creative. And I do see another question in the chat. Do you have tips on landing a job in another city? What's the best way to let companies know I'm open to relocate? I mean, on your resume, you can write that, and definitely write the zip code, because I know ATS looks at zip codes. And then on your LinkedIn, you can, when you're open to work, you put those cities in there too. I would be curious. This is one of those places I'd be curious to look at the macro trends, because I wonder how that's faring right now and whether people are hiring more remote or locally. And my gut is telling me that I feel like I've heard that as of recent, that there might be less relocation being essentially, they often pay to do that. And so I think my gut, from what I've heard as of recent, it's not that it's impossible, but I would just be wary of that. And it's not to say you can, of course, I want you to live where you want to live, but these days, sometimes people like move and then they find the job, and that's a huge step to take. But, and then just obviously networking, like literally network with the people who are at the companies that have an office in the city you want to be at. I mean, that's your number one thing, really,
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And sometimes I hate saying this because the way things aren't the way they should be. But I have heard some hesitancy of people hiring essentially people that are going to be expensive to relocate,
Yeah.
which is such a bummer to say out loud, but I think it is something to consider. So, if you're like are willing to relocate, I think expand the search, make it really clear, all the tips that Rachel said on your LinkedIn profile, you can have it on your resume. Um, if you are really actually planning to move to one specific location, even if you're not there yet, I think you still have the leeway to be able to put that on your application materials to make sure that you are maybe getting tracked in those applicant tracking systems and not automatically filtered out. But then certainly being like really upfront when you are in front of a person, right? You don't want to make it seem like you are like misleading or lying or anything of the sort.
Yeah. Yeah.
There.
I know there's a question in the chat and there's also a Q&A question. So maybe we can like rapid fire in the next 3 minutes. But do you have thoughts on putting open to work on your LinkedIn profile? Heard both positive and negative things. Same. Truthfully, yeah, I'm curious, Kelly, your thoughts. I would say it really depends. Like, I think doing the recruiter only is okay. But if you're like, I don't want to say I'm desperate, but if you're like, I need work ASAP, then like my gut is just like, put it on there and don't worry about that stigma piece of things. But honestly, it could be an experiment. You can try it both ways. The other way to think about it is just what feels comfortable to you. If it's going to give you like agony and anxiety, like you don't need to do that necessarily. If you're networking one-on-one with the people in your target field, it's not going to matter whether you have a banner on there or not. So doing the right actions, I think, is critical. And Ramya mentioned, what are the various avenues for networking apart from one-on-one networking? Yeah, I mean, joining groups, joining events, joining communities. Like if you're not doing it one-on-one, you're doing it in a larger atmosphere. But to me, I would definitely prioritize having those one-on-one phone calls as much as humanly possible. And then like once a week, join an event, join a group, join a community, like get out there in a bigger way. But the one-on-one connection to me is the most important.
Yes, 100% everything Rachel said. Another fun networking approach that I have seen people do is figuring out conferences, which sometimes can be really pricey. So if you've got the budget and you're going to find it educational and you can go and you can meet with people, great. But also, I just worked with someone who I thought had a brilliant idea to essentially see who's going to be there from different companies and reach out to have little coffee chats. And so she did not even enter the conference, but like met with people near the conference. And essentially they were like all from all of these different companies coming together in one location. So I'm not saying that's the only form of networking, but I'm using it as an example of creativity and how people are really like working these different events to their advantage.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm so glad we answered everyone's questions here. And of course, we have more pre-submitted questions, but like, please reach out and connect with both of us. Let me get you all my LinkedIn. But connect with us. And if there's more you want to hear, we can come back and do more of this. And with Woken, we always offer a free initial chat. So if you want to talk one-on-one about how you're doing, please do reach out, and hopefully we'll come back and do more, and just know that we're here for you. We know this is all difficult, but you can totally master it. You can own it. You will see those results. Just get creative, right? If that becomes your favorite word, then we've done something good today, right? Shake it up, own it, find that resilience, get creative. And yeah, we'll be back with more.
Yeah, this is great. Well, thank you, Rachel, and thank you everyone who came and participated. This was so lovely, and I'm glad we were all able to get together and connect today.
Yeah.
All
Cool.
right.
Bye, everyone.
Later. Bye, everyone. Thank you.